Jian Justin Siak lies on a wide sofa. The logs in the fireplace are dying down. The room is large and almost dark. He looks at the ceiling. His stomach is beeping quietly, but insistently. He wants to eat, not just a snack, but a hearty, delicious meal. He turns his head to look at the clock. The hands point well past midnight. Everyone around him is asleep. The silence is so thick, you can hear the embers crackling in the fire. He throws back the blanket. The feeling of hunger doesn't go away. He remembers the cook. He lives in the guest house and, of course, is already asleep. Jin Seok doesn't want to wake him because of his late-night desire. He decides to make do on his own. His hand reaches for the phone lying on the low table. The screen glows brightly in the dim light. He scrolls through his contacts, but stops. Instead, he opens the familiar yellow app with the image of a bag. The interface glows, offering hundreds of options. His fingers habitually find the Restaurants Open Now section. The selection is limited, but his favorite Korean one still works. He taps the logo. A menu opens. He begins choosing without much interest, almost mechanically. His eyes skim the items. Braised beef, galbi chim, adds to cart. Spicy sprout salad with spittle, adds. Steamed mandu dumplings, adds. His finger continues to tap the screen. Fried squid, spicy tteokbokki rice cake appetizer. Then he moves on to dessert. Fruit pat bingsun and a slice of melted cheesecake. He finishes with a bag of salted rice crackers. The cart displays an impressive total and weight. He doesn't look. Scrolls down. Selects Pay by Card. Nyent. Confirms with his fingerprint. A countdown appears on the screen. Cooking time, 35 to 45 minutes. He puts the phone on silent mode and puts it aside. Now all that's left is to wait. The screen goes dark, and the room is plunged into semi-darkness again, broken only by the light of the dying flame. He gets up from the sofa. Soft slippers make no sound on the polished wooden floor. He steps out of the living room into a wide hallway, lit only by the occasional downlight. The path to the kitchen is familiar down to the last centimeter. He flicks the light switch. A soft light comes on above the large island countertop. The kitchen is perfectly clean. Everything gleams. The cook had tidied everything up before leaving. Jin Seok opens a specific cabinet. It holds jars of tea, coffee, and cocoa. He picks up a tall, dark blue ceramic mug, his favorite. He places it on the countertop. He opens a tin of cocoa powder. He scoops up 2 spoonfuls and pours it into the mug. Then he turns on the electric kettle, which sits on the same countertop. The sound of boiling water is the only loud sound in the vast house. While the water is heating, he opens the refrigerator. From the deli drawer, he takes out a small glass jar filled with miniature white marshmallows. He places the jar next to his mug. The kettle turns off. He carefully pours a little boiling water into the mug, making sure there are no lumps, and stirs it thoroughly with a spoon. It forms a thick paste. Then he fills the mug almost to the brim with water and stirs again. The aroma of sweet cocoa fills the space around him. He unscrews the lid of the jar, takes 3 white marshmallows with tongs, and drops them into the hot drink. They immediately begin to slowly melt around the edges. He watches them for a few seconds. Without this simple act, his evening truly feels incomplete. This is his personal ritual, unnecessary and beyond anyone's control. He takes the hot mug by the handle and turns off the light in the kitchen. He returns down the dark hallway to the living room. The fireplace now gives off only a dull warmth and a dim red glow from the embers. He places the mug on the low table and sinks onto the sofa. A heavy, soft wool blanket lies nearby. He pulls it over himself, wrapping his legs and torso. The blanket immediately feels cozy and safe. He settles in, picks up the mug, and takes his first small sip. The hot, sweet, and intense flavor envelops him. He feels warmth spreading through his body. Not from the fireplace anymore, but from within. He drinks slowly, staring at the dying embers. Occasionally, he adjusts the blanket. His thoughts become jumbled and fragmented. He remembers something about tomorrow's meeting, but the thought floats away before it can begin. His eyes slowly close. He opens them and takes another sip. The marshmallows have almost completely dissolved, making the drink thicker and sweeter. The crackling in the fireplace becomes quieter and less frequent. He blinks longer and longer. His eyelids feel leaden. His head slumps against the soft back of the sofa. His hand holding the mug drops, and he places it on the table, almost without looking, by touch. The blanket now covers him completely, except for his head. He turns on his side, tucking his hand under his cheek. The last thing he sees before his eyelids close completely is the dim red spot of the fireplace. The anticipation of food fades to the farthest reaches of his consciousness and drowns there. His breathing deepens and evens. His body relaxes completely under the blankets. His face, usually tense and focused, now smooths out. He sleeps deeply, dreamlessly. The room is now completely silent, broken only by his even breathing. A mug of half-finished cocoa sits on the table. A couple of marshmallow grains lingering on the surface have turned into a sticky film. The fireplace no longer crackles. The coals are covered in gray ash and slowly cool. The temperature in the large room begins to drop slightly, but he remains warm under the blankets. His phone lies nearby on the sofa, its screen black. About 20 minutes have passed since he ordered it. The courier has long since picked up his large order and is racing through the night city. But Jin-seok knows nothing of this. He is asleep. His filling dinner in cardboard boxes is making its way to him through the rain-slick streets, and he has already forgotten about hunger. The clock is ticking. Time is passing. There is still no food. Lee Min-ho picks up an order from a restaurant. He sees a huge cardboard box on the counter. The cook helps him take it. The box is heavy and warm on the bottom. It's covered with cling film on top. A strong, complex odor seeps through the film. It smells of fried meat, something sweet, and spices. Minho is in a hurry. He has 3 more orders in his bag. He thanks the cook, takes the receipt, and goes outside. The night is cool. He places the box on the back of his electric scooter. He secures it with 2 thick elastic bands. He checks it is secure. He sits down on the seat. He inserts an earpiece into his ear. The dispatcher in this earpiece recites the address. Saran Street, Building 10. Minho repeats the address silently, turns on the headlight, and takes off. He drives 2 blocks. The sky was clear, but now the first heavy drop falls on the windshield of his helmet. Then a second. Within a minute, a full-on downpour begins. The rain lashes his face. The wind whips at his sides. The road in front of the headlight becomes shiny and black. Minho slows down. He tries to pull the hood of his jacket over his helmet with one hand. It doesn't help much. Water runs down his back. The scooter tires hiss softly on the wet asphalt. He leans forward, trying to get a better view of the road. The inside of his helmet begins to fog up. He wipes it with his gloved finger. Riding becomes difficult and unpleasant. The receipt with the address is taped to the box. It's printed on plain paper. The cook has wrapped several layers of cling film over it to protect it from moisture. But water is stubborn. It finds a crack. A thin stream seeps under the top layer of film at the edge of the paper. The paper immediately darkens as it gets soaked. The printer ink begins to run. It turns into blue streaks. Minho doesn't notice. He's looking at the road. Raindrops are hitting the receipt. The part where the number 0 is printed in the house number 10 is the first to get wet. The ink flows, mixes with the water, and disappears. All that remains is a crisp vertical line, the number 1, and a small blue spot where the 0 should be. Minho turns onto Saran Street. The rain has let up a bit. He stops at the curb and looks at the receipt to confirm the house number. He peels back the edge of the film. He sees the address, Saran Street, Building 1. The number 1 is clear. There's only a wet spot next to it. He can't remember the exact address by heart. He thinks he must have gotten it wrong. All he can think of is Saran Street. The number 1 seems right to him. He looks at the nearest house. He sees a sign with the number 5. So, house 1 must be at the beginning of the street. He starts driving again and drives forward. He passes house 10, which stands in the dark. His gaze doesn't linger on it. He looks for the number 1. He finds a small old house with a barely visible number 1 on the gate. Minho sighs with relief. He stops, unclips the rubber bands, and picks up the heavy box. He walks to the gate. He is sure that he has come to the right address. It's quiet in the house at number 1 on Saran Street. A single dim light bulb burns in the small living room. It illuminates a worn sofa, an old wooden table, and 2 chairs. The wallpaper is pale, peeling in places. A thin, faded rug lies on the floor. A small, thick-screen television sits in the corner, turned off. The doors to the other 2 rooms are slightly open. A narrow bed is visible from one, a fold-out bed from the other. The air in the house is cool, but not fresh. Moran sits on the edge of the cot. She strokes her daughter's hair. "I know, honey. Tomorrow. Something will happen tomorrow." She says this in a whisper. She has been saying this for the 3rd day in a row. Today, they ran out of money. They spent it 2 days ago on a bag of rice and eggs. Takes a few sips. Moran returns to the living room and drinks her glass. The water fills her stomach, creating a deceptive feeling of fullness for a couple of minutes. She turns off the main light bulb. Only a small nightlight in the socket remains on. It casts a weak yellow light. Moran lies down on the sofa. She covers herself with an old but clean thin blanket. She looks at the ceiling. She thinks about tomorrow. She needs to find a part-time job. Any kind. She has already visited all the stores in the area. Maybe tomorrow will bring her luck. Aaron quietly calls her. Moran answers, "Sleep, my daughter. The morning is wiser than the evening." She herself does not believe these words. Silence fills the house again. They both lie with their eyes open in the darkness. They listen to their own stomachs rumble. They try to breathe evenly and not move. Movement only makes them hungrier. They simply lie there and wait for sleep to take them, even if only for a few hours. They were almost lost in thought. Consciousness was already beginning to drift. At that moment, a sharp, piercing sound came from outside. The doorbell. It was electric, old, and its sound was an unpleasant loud crack. Moran's whole body shuddered, as if struck. Her heart began to pound somewhere in her throat. Who was it? It was the middle of the night. She instantly sat up on the couch. Her hands were cold. Disturbing thoughts raced through her head. Debts? But she didn't owe anyone. Or had something happened? She heard Aaron jump up in his bed. "Mom? It's okay, stay put," Moran whispers. But she gets up. She straightens her simple nightgown. She throws a threadbare robe over her shoulders. She approaches the door. Her heart is still beating rapidly. The doorbell rings again. Briefly, insistently. Someone is in a hurry. Moran doesn't look through the peephole. It's long since sealed shut with paper from the inside anyway. She slowly, with some effort, turns the heavy bolt. The sound of scraping metal seems incredibly loud. Then she takes hold of the handle and opens the door. She opens it only a narrow crack, squeezing herself into the opening. Night and damp, cold air immediately rush into the house. On the threshold, under the dim light of a street lamp, stands a figure in a hooded raincoat, glistening from the rain. She opens the door just a crack. The night and the silhouette of a man are visible in the doorway. A courier stands in the doorway. His yellow hooded jacket glistens from the rain. Drops trickle down his shoulders and sleeves. A faint smile crosses his face, both casual and tired. He doesn't meet her eyes. His gaze glides past her in a hurry. "Delivery," he says simply. His voice is a little hoarse from the damp air. She doesn't have time to think. The cardboard box ends up in her palms. It is indeed heavy and very warm underneath. The warmth penetrates the thin walls of the box and her own cold fingers. The courier immediately releases the box, making sure she's holding it. He glances quickly at the screen of his phone, its waterproof case slung over his wrist. "Good evening," he says, a little louder, a standard phrase honed over hundreds of deliveries. He's already turning away, his shoulders tense beneath the wet fabric. He takes 2 quick steps away from the door, stepping off the tiny porch onto the wet asphalt. Moran opens her mouth. She wants to say something, to ask, "Are you sure?" Or, "Is this for us?" Or simply, "Wait!" But the words stick in her throat. Her voice won't work. She can only watch as his yellow-clad figure shimmers in the sparse light of the street lamp. He runs to his scooter, parked at the curb. He starts it with one movement. The motor makes a quiet humming sound. He sits down without even looking back. The headlights light up 2 streaks in the rain, and he drives away. The sound of the engine quickly dissolves into the noise of the rain and the night. He is no more. Moran is still standing in the doorway. A cold wind blows against her face and chest. She is holding a heavy, warm, unfamiliar box in her hands. The door is still ajar. She slowly takes a step back into the house. With her heel, she tries to push the door closed. The door slams with a dull thud. The latch clangs loudly. Now she stands alone in the dark hallway. She leans her back against the door, as if afraid that someone will break in. She holds the box in her hands. She looks down at it. Through the film, she sees the logo of some restaurant whose name is unfamiliar to her. She sees the numbers on the receipt. The amount of the order makes her eyes widen involuntarily. It is more than she spends on food in 2 weeks. She does not move. Her brain tries to process what is happening. Someone made a mistake. That is obvious. Such an order could never have been intended for them. But it is here, in her hands, real, warm, fragrant heaviness. And then the smell reaches her completely. It penetrates the cardboard and plastic wrap. It fills the narrow, dark hallway. It's the smell of fried meat, the sweet, rich aroma of beef in sauce, the scent of garlic and sesame oil, something spicy and delicious. And then there's the sweet, vanilla lingering of dessert. Her stomach, which had only been aching quietly a moment ago, contracts with a sharp, painful spasm. Saliva instantly fills her mouth. She involuntarily clutches the box closer to her. At that moment, Erin runs out of the room. The girl is barefoot, in thin pajamas. Her eyes are wide. She's looking not at her mother, but at the box in her hands. She, too, can already smell it. It floats throughout the house, displacing the smell of dust and age. "Mom," Erin whispers, not taking her eyes off the box. Is this food?" She comes closer, cautiously, as if afraid to startle it. Her small hand reaches out and touches the side of the cardboard box. "It's warm," the girl says, her voice trembling. Moran finally takes a deep breath. She pulls away from the door. "Yes," she answers quietly. "It looks like food." She carries the box into the main room, to the center of the old wooden table. Erin follows her, keeping pace with her. Moran places the box on the table. The sound is dull, heavy. They both look at it. It takes up almost half the table. It is the largest and most mysterious thing to have appeared in their house in months. Moran slowly removes the thin plastic bag containing the receipt from the box. The receipt itself is wet at the edge, the ink smudged. Erin stands on tiptoe to peer inside from above, but the plastic wrap is in the way. Moran still hesitates. Taking something that doesn't belong to her is wrong. But the smell in her daughter's quiet, hopeful gaze. She reaches out. Her fingers find the edge of the cling film tightly wrapped around the box. She grabs it and begins to unwind. The tape crunches. The film peels away, revealing the cardboard lid of the box. The film peels away. Moran lifts the cardboard lid of the box. Inside, they are greeted by a neatly organized environment. White plastic containers with clear lids stand in 2 rows. They are all clean, fogged up on the inside. Under the first layer, a second layer is visible. This isn't just a one-time meal. It's a huge, generous order. Moran carefully takes the first container. She removes the lid. Steam hits her face, warm and moist. They place container after container on the table. The table, usually empty, is now groaning. Lastly, they take out 2 desserts, a delicate milk pudding and a slice of sponge cake, and a bag of saltine crackers. They gaze silently at this abundance. Then they look at each other, and tears roll down both of their cheeks at the same time. Quiet, unstoppable. These are tears of shame, because they are taking something that is not theirs. These are tears of wild, uncontrollable relief. These are tears of hunger that sees Mia's salvation before it. They don't wipe them away. Moran nods. They can no longer resist. Moran takes 2 clean plates from the shelf. She puts a generous portion of rice on each. Then, using tongs from a container, she places a piece of beef on top. The sauce spreads across the white rice in an amber puddle. She places the plate in front of Erin. The girl is already sitting on a chair, pulled closer to the table. She clutches a spoon in her fist. "Eat," Moran says hoarsely. Erin doesn't wait for a second invitation. She scoops up a spoonful of rice and meat and pops it into her mouth. Her eyes close. She lets out a soft, almost inaudible groan. She has never eaten anything like it. The meat melts, the sauce sweet and salty at the same time. Moran sits down opposite her and begins to eat. First piece, second. She eats quickly, almost greedily, forgetting all manners. They don't speak. The only sounds are the clatter of spoons on plates, the soft slurping of their lips, and the ragged breathing. Moran tries a dumpling. It's juicy, with a fragrant filling of pork and onions. She breaks off a piece of crispy squid. It's salty and savory. They open the containers, sampling everything. They don't pounce on one thing, but divide each dish equally. It's a feast. It's a celebration. The hunger that gripped their stomachs recedes, replaced by a pleasant, warm heaviness. After a while, their movements slow. They're full, but they finish everything, down to the last grain of rice and drop of sauce. They leave only the desserts. Moran pushes her plate away. Erin licks her spoon. They sit, breathing heavily. A pile of empty containers lies on the table. The smell of food permeates the entire house. Their cheeks turn pink. A lively glint appears in their eyes. They look at each other again, and this time they're smiling. There's still some shame somewhere, but it's pushed far, far away, to the very edge of consciousness. They're full, truly full, for the first time in a very long time. Jeon Jin-seok wakes from a sudden, uncomfortable movement. His whole body jerks, trying to figure out where he is. He is lying on the couch. The room is completely dark and quiet, very cold. He lies motionless, trying to remember. The fireplace. He fell asleep by the fireplace. He turns his head. Where the fire used to glow, there is now a black, gaping hole. The embers have long since gone out. The only light in the room is a weak gray light from the huge window, falling from the streetlights. He looks at the low table in front of the couch. His empty cocoa mug sits there. He looks at the screen, then at the empty table, then back at the screen. His face, relaxed just a second ago, slowly changes. His brows draw together. His lips press into a thin, hard line. The room grows even colder. Where's his food? Jin-seok slowly dials the delivery service. He holds the phone to his ear. His voice is quiet, almost a whisper, but there is not a single warm note in it. It is low even, and very clear. There is a hint of steel in it. He does not shout. Jeon-si, I see your order. It is indeed marked as delivered at 11:47 p.m. The courier marked it complete. He didn't deliver anything. No one rang the intercom. No one rang the doorbell. Jin-seok snaps. His patience is razor thin. Another pause, a longer one. The operator's muffled conversation with someone else can be heard. Then her voice comes back on the line, less confident. I apologize for the inconvenience. I checked with the logistics manager. The courier, he confirmed the delivery. The address. The delivery address is Saran Street, Building 1. Jin-seok freezes. Saran Street. It's a parallel street, a 2-minute drive away. But his house is number 10, not number 1. My address is number 10, not number 1, he says, and every letter of his words chills the air. Oh, I see. The order details. Indeed, the address is correct, number 10. But the courier's report says number 1. There must have been an error in entering the confirmation. Or, she continues speaking, apologizing, offering compensation. A re-delivery. Jin-seok no longer hears her. He stares into the darkness of his living room. Someone has received his food. Someone in number 1 might be eating his dinner right now. His dinner. The one he ordered. The one he paid for. The one he waited for. The cold rage inside him boils, turning into something sharp and burning. That's enough. He quietly interrupts the operator. He ignores her further apologies. He hangs up. He sits for a few seconds in complete silence. His gaze is blank, staring into space. Then he stands abruptly. The blanket falls to the floor. He ignores it. He goes into the bedroom. Quickly, without turning on the overhead light, he throws off his robe. He puts on dark pants and a dark sweater. He pulls on simple leather shoes. He doesn't think about the rain outside. His thoughts are clear and simple. His food was delivered to the wrong place. He will go and get it. He is not going to wait for a reorder or a refund. He wants exactly what he chose. If these people have already started eating, well, he will make them put it back in the containers. He has no remorse or doubts. In his world, what is his should be his. He goes downstairs to the coat closet by the exit. He takes a long black coat from the coat rack. He doesn't put it on, just slings it over his arm. He takes the car keys from the table. He leaves the house through the side door into the garage. The cold night air hits his face. A black car pulls up to the curb in front of a small house. Jin-seok turns off the engine. He sits for a few seconds, looking at the building. It looks old, peeling, and dark. Only one window glows dimly with a yellow light, perhaps from a nightlight or a television. He opens the car door and steps out. A drizzle immediately settles in fine drops on his dark hair and the shoulders of his sweater. He doesn't put on a coat. He walks to the gate. It's unlocked, creaking on rusty hinges. The small yard is empty. 2 steps on the wet concrete tiles, and he's at the wooden front door. He doesn't look for the doorbell. He raises his fist and raps his knuckles on the wood 3 times, hard but not hysterically. The knock sounds hollow, commanding, and brooking no argument. He takes a half step back, waiting. His face in the streetlight is motionless and cold, not a trace of doubt or curiosity, only firm confidence and a readiness to take what's his. From behind the door, soft footsteps are heard. A rustling sound, the sound of a bolt being pulled back. The door doesn't open immediately, but slowly, cautiously. A woman's face appears through the crack. Yoon Moran. Her face is pale, her skin almost translucent, with bluish shadows under her huge eyes. She is wearing the same worn robe. Her hair is pulled back into a careless ponytail. She looks exhausted and frightened. She sees a tall man in expensive dark clothes standing on the threshold. His posture, his gaze, everything speaks of power, money, and discontent. Instinctively, she takes a half step back. At that moment, a small figure peeks out from behind her leg. Erin. The girl hides behind her mother's leg, clasping it with her arms. She looks at the stranger with large, dark eyes, full of fear and question. She is dressed in thin, cleanly laundered, but clearly old pajamas. They stand in the doorway, illuminated by the light from the hallway, fragile, as if ready to crumble at the sound of a loud word. Jin-seok sees them. He sees the poverty written on every detail, on the faded paint of the door, on the thin fabric of their robe, on the pallor of their faces. But this is only the background. His gaze slides over to them and then continues on, deeper into the hallway, as if he's already searching for his box. "You took my food," Jin-seok says. His voice is quiet, but every syllable is precise and clear. It's not a question. It's a statement of fact and an accusation at the same time. He doesn't say hello. He doesn't introduce himself. He came on business. Moran freezes. Her thin fingers convulsively clutch the hem of her robe. Her heart sinks somewhere into the abyss. Retribution has come. So quickly. She knew it was a mistake. But she had hoped for at least one night of satiety. She tries to find the words, but her lips tremble. She can't utter a sound. Aaron presses himself even closer to her. "The delivery guy got the wrong house number," Jin-seok continues, his gaze finally focusing on the woman's face. "My order was for house 10. You received it. Where is it?" Moran lowers her eyes. Her shoulders hunch even more. She takes a weak step back, inviting him in without a word. She has nothing to say in her defense. She is simply revealing the truth. Jin-seok steps over the threshold without hesitation. He enters a narrow, dark hallway, and then his sense of smell, heightened by hunger and anger, catches a scent. That same scent, his beef, his sauce, mixed with the smell of cheap detergent and dampness. The smell comes from a room to the right. He follows the scent, passing the women. He enters the main room. His gaze falls on the table, and he sees everything. On the old wooden table sits an empty but uncollected delivery box. Next to it sits a neatly stacked stack of empty plastic containers. All the containers are empty, washed but empty. On 2 plates next to each sit a pair of clean spoons. A small stain of sauce remains at the bottom of one of the plates. Everything is eaten, clean, every rice, every gram of meat. His dinner is gone. It has become these empty containers. Fury, cold and sharp, washes over him with renewed vigor. He turns to the woman standing timidly in the doorway, holding her daughter's hand. You just sat down and ate the whole thing?" His voice now carries an icy shock. "You didn't even think to call? To check? You just took someone else's order and ate it?" Moran looks up at him. Tears well up in her eyes, but she doesn't let them fall. Her lips move. We haven't eaten for 3 days," she breathes. It's not an excuse. It's just the truth, quiet and terrible. She says it almost in a whisper, but in the silence of the poor house, the words ring louder than any scream. These are not the remains of a feast of greedy people. These are the remains of a desperate, quiet feast of those pushed to the brink. His brain, accustomed to assessing situations and people in seconds, assembles a picture: pale faces, simple, old clothes, perfect cleanliness in poverty, the smell of his food, absorbed into this poor dwelling. His anger, hot and sharp, suddenly collides with this wall. Starving. His anger fades. It simply dissolves, leaving behind an unpleasant, cold emptiness. He looks away from the table, back at the woman, at the girl, who now peeks out a little more from behind her mother's leg, still frightened. He doesn't see thieves. He sees people. Very poor, very hungry people. And he just broke into their house at night to take the only good thing they had had in a long time. By mistake, not their fault. His lips tighten. His jaw, previously tense with anger, is now tense with something else. He feels heat in his cheeks, even though the room is cold. He suddenly feels ashamed. Ashamed of his tone, of his words, of this entire trip. He, young Jin-seok, who was used to solving problems with force and money, ended up here, playing the role of a rude rich man terrorizing an impoverished family over a box of food. It's absurd. It's unworthy. He exhales slowly. His shoulders raised for confrontation, slump. "I'm sorry," he says quietly. The word doesn't come easily to him. It's unfamiliar in his language in this context. He looks straight at the woman, and there's no longer a drop of the former coldness in his eyes. Only a heavy, uncomfortable understanding. "I didn't know." The silence in the room is different now. The tension has subsided, but an oppressive awkwardness has replaced it. Jin-seok can't simply turn around and leave. Shame demands action. He glances around the room again, this time assessing. He sees a tiny old refrigerator in the corner of the kitchen area. It barely hums. On the table next to empty containers lie a few papers, receipts. He takes a step toward the table. His movements are now calm, devoid of aggression. He takes a flat leather wallet from his inside pants pocket. He opens it. There are no small bills inside. He takes out a thick wad of crisp bills. Without counting, he places it on the table, next to the stacked containers. The money lies in an impressive pile. Moran freezes, looking at it. She can't move. Then Jin-seok picks up the receipts from the table. He glances at them quickly. Utilities, heating. They all have payment stamps, but the last dates are close. He takes out his phone, opens the camera, takes clear photos of each receipt. His fingers quickly scroll through his contacts. He finds the number of his assistant, Kim Taeyong. He presses call. The phone answers on the first ring. Boss? The assistant's voice is cheerful despite the time. Taeyong! Listen carefully, Jin-seok says, his voice businesslike again, but without the previous harshness. I'll send you an address. A woman and her child live at this address. They have no food, and the refrigerator doesn't work. Buy a new refrigerator immediately. The best one that can be delivered right now, tonight. Fill it completely. Meat, fish, vegetables, fruit, milk, all the basics. Within the hour. Okay, Jin-seok says and hangs up. He looks at the woman. She tries to speak, but only a broken, quiet sound, like a moan, comes out. She raises her hands and covers her face. Her shoulders begin to shake. She is crying, not sobbing, but silently crying, from the very core, from unbearable relief and incomprehension. All the tension of the last weeks, months, hunger, fear, hopelessness, bursts out in these silent sobs. She stands in the middle of her poor room, and the world around her has turned upside down in 5 minutes. Erin lets go of her mother's hand. She looks at her crying mother, then at the man. His face is no longer angry. The girl takes a small, hesitant step forward, then another. She approaches Jin-seok. He stands motionless, watching the woman, acutely embarrassed by her tears. And then he feels a light touch on his leg. He looks down. The little girl hugs his leg, pressing her cheek against the fabric of his pants. She looks up at him, her eyes still wide, but the fear in them has been replaced by something else. Pure, childish wonder and gratitude. Thank you, Uncle, Erin says quietly. Her voice is ringing and clear, like a bell in this quiet room. These words, this simple touch, affect Jin-seok more powerfully than any tears or pleas. He freezes. He's not used to such sincerity. He slowly, very carefully, places his hand on her head, a light, awkward stroking motion. Everything will be okay, he says quietly, more to himself than to her. He understands that his presence here only intensifies the emotional storm. He needs to leave. He carefully frees his leg from the girl's embrace. Moran lowers her hands from her face. Her eyes are red, tear-stained, but there is light in them now. She looks at him, and in that look, there is an ocean of words that she cannot utter. She tries to bow low, but Jin-seok stops her with a slight wave of his hand. No need, he says simply. People will arrive soon with the refrigerator. Open it for them. He glances around the room again. His gaze lingers on the empty containers. Now they seem to him not like evidence of theft, but like evidence of something important. He nods to the woman and the girl. Briefly, matter-of-factly. He turns and leaves the room into the hallway. He goes outside, closing the door behind him. The cold night air envelops him again. He walks to the car. He gets behind the wheel. He starts the engine. But he doesn't drive right away. He sits, looking at the dark facade of the small house. He no longer feels rage. He doesn't even feel hunger. Inside, there is an empty and unusually calm. He can't name this feeling. It is not joy. It is something deeper and quieter. Awareness. He sets off and drives slowly away. He no longer has the desire to eat. He drives home, and the thought of food does not even cross his mind. Yoon Moran and Erin barely slept. After the man left, they sat at the table, staring at the wad of money, afraid to touch it. Then some people arrived. Young, serious-looking, in clean uniforms. They greeted them politely, asking no unnecessary questions. They carried a large, silent, silver refrigerator into the house. They took out the old barely working one. They hooked up the new one. Then they started bringing in bags. Lots of bags. They filled the refrigerator to capacity. Fresh vegetables and fruits, packages of meat and fish, milk, yogurt, cheese, eggs, rice, noodles, canned goods, butter, various sauces and spices appeared on the top shelves. They left bread, cookies, and a few chocolate bars on the table. The people checked everything, politely wished them a good evening, and left. Mother and daughter spent the rest of the night, alternately dozing off and waking to check if they were dreaming. They got up at dawn. The first thing Aaron did was run to the refrigerator and carefully opened it. The chill air and the sight of the full shelves made her laugh. Moran had made them breakfast. A real breakfast. Scrambled eggs with ham and fresh vegetables. They ate slowly, savoring it. Then Moran turned to the money. She counted it, folded it neatly, and hid it in the safest place. She was already making plans. Pay off her debts. Buy Aaron a new, "Sorry, but I didn't order anything." "Are you sure?" The courier smiled. "What is this, Mom?" "I don't know," Moran replied. She untied the neat ribbon and removed the lid. Inside, on soft white paper, lay two perfect pieces of cake, one with berries, the other with chocolate. They looked as if they had just come from the best pastry shop. Between the pieces of cake lay a small envelope made of thick, creamy paper. Moran carefully picked it up. Inside was a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. There were just a few words, printed in elegant font. "Let this be a tradition. Every morning. BD." She read the note aloud. Aaron looked at it, not quite understanding. "What does this mean, Mom?" Moran looked again at the cakes, at the note, then at the new refrigerator. Her heart sank with overwhelming emotion. "It means, dear," she said quietly, "that we are cared for." They decided not to put it off. Moran poured hot tea, now in a new package, into 2 cups. She carefully transferred the pieces of cake to small plates. They sat down at the table. Breakfast was already over, but this cake was special. It wasn't just a dessert. It was a sign. They ate slowly, savoring each little piece. The cake was incredibly delicious, airy, sweet enough to lift the mood without becoming boring. Aaron smiled, and a chocolate stain remained on her cheek. They finished their tea in silence. The house was quiet, but this was a different silence. Not the tense, hungry silence of despair, but the calm, peaceful silence of safety. Moran cleared the table. She looked at her daughter. Aaron was sitting and drawing, her face focused and happy. "Mom, will there be cake tomorrow too?" the girl asked, raising her head. "Not every day, I guess," Moran smiled. "But something good will happen. I'm sure." She went to the window and looked out. The day was cloudy, but bright. She thought of the stone-faced man who had entered their house like a thunderstorm and left, leaving behind a quiet, solid hope. She thought of his eyes, in which anger gave way to shame, and then to determination to help. She didn't know who he was, but she knew that today they were full. And she knew that tomorrow they would be able to have breakfast. They had food in the fridge, money for a rainy day, and the inexplicable, generous kindness of a stranger. Aaron finished drawing and ran to her mother, hugging her around the waist. They stood by the window, looking out at their small yard. They didn't talk about the future. They simply felt it. It was no longer frightening and foggy. It was calm. They were full. They were together. And they were no longer afraid of tomorrow. A few days later, the morning began again with a box from the courier. It contained fresh croissants and 2 small pastries, and a new note with the same words, "Every morning." CD. Yun Moran stood in the kitchen, holding the elegant box, and a feeling of gratitude overflowed within her. It was heavy and warm, like a stone on her heart, but it didn't crush her. Rather, it warmed her. Simply saying thank you to nothing wasn't enough. She wanted, no, she needed to do something, to send something back, to let him know, to let him see. The idea came to her as she looked at the pastries. A cake! She would bake a cake. Not as fancy as these, of course. Simple, homemade, from what was now in her new, generous refrigerator. That would be her answer, but for that, she needed an address. She knew the name, the initials CD on the note. The next day, when the courier brought the morning box again, this time with fruit tarts, Moran plucked up her courage. She opened the door before he could leave. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking only slightly. "Just a small token of gratitude. Could you pass it on? Or suggest a way?" The man looked embarrassed. "Rules were rules. I cannot take anything for delivery, and we do not disclose clients' addresses. It is confidential." Moran did not give up. A quiet but firm determination flashed in her eyes. "Then perhaps you could tell whoever is organizing these deliveries. Please tell them that the woman and her daughter from Wonsaran Street really want to thank Jeong Jin-seok personally. We'd like to send him a small gift in return. Just this once. We know his initials, but nothing more." She spoke sincerely, without pathos, and it apparently had an effect. The courier hesitated slightly. "Okay," he said. "I'll pass your request on to the office, but I'm making no promises." "That's enough, thank you," Moran said, with a deep bow. 2 days passed. No answer. Moran was beginning to lose hope, but she pressed on. She found a mention of Jeon Jin-seok online, using his initials and description, a respectable man, likely influential. There were no photos, but the area where his office was located was indicated. It was a business center. She couldn't just go there, but she could send a package there. On the third day, when the courier brought her morning pastries, he unexpectedly handed her a small white envelope along with the box. "From the office," he said curtly. Inside was a blank sheet of paper, printed only on the address, 10 Camden Street. No first or last name, just an address. It was the answer to her request, dry, formal, and incredibly valuable. That same day, Moran turned her small kitchen into a veritable bakery. She'd found a recipe for a simple sponge cake. She now had all the ingredients: eggs, flour, sugar, butter. Aaron helped, carefully whisking the batter. They added vanilla and a little lemon zest for flavor. While the cake baked, filling the house with a sweet, cozy scent, Moran sat down to write a note. She tried dozens of phrases, but they all seemed too long, too ornate, or too simple. Finally, she took a clean sheet of paper and wrote out just a few words in her meticulous handwriting. "Thank you for everything. You are our savior. Sincerely, Yoon Moran and Aaron." The cake had cooled. She didn't cover it with elaborate frosting, but simply dusted it lightly with powdered sugar to make it look simple yet dignified. She cut off exactly half of it, a large, generous slice. I carefully packed it in a clean cardboard box I'd saved from one of my morning deliveries. I placed a note on top. I tied it with simple twine, not silk ribbon. The next day, she took the box to the post office in her neighborhood. She paid for the most secure delivery to the specified address, sending the package without a return address, only with the recipient's name, Jeon Jin-seok Si. In the mansion at 10 Camden Street, Jin-seok was finishing his late breakfast when his assistant, Kim Tae-young, entered the dining room holding a small cardboard box. Sponge cake, lightly dusted with powdered sugar. It looked homemade, imperfect, warm, despite being cold. Next to it lay a folded piece of paper. He unfolded the note. He recognized the handwriting. Not typewritten, but lively, slightly hesitant letters. He read it. "Thank you for everything. You are our savior. Sincerely, Yoon Moran and Aaron." He stared at those words for a long time. Then at the cake. He remembered the empty containers on the old wooden table, the woman's pale face, the girl's arm around her leg. He set the note aside. Then he picked up a small dessert fork from the table. He broke off a tiny piece from the edge of the cake and tasted it. The cake was simple, not as moist as the ones in the best bakeries, not as complex in flavor. It had a little more vanilla than it needed, but it was the most honest and most meaningful dessert Jung Jin-seok had eaten in years. He finished that small piece. Then he carefully closed the box with the lid. "Taeyong," he said without looking up, "cancel my dinner at the restaurant tonight. I'll eat at home." "Understood, boss." Jin-seok took the box with the cake and the note and went up to his office. He set the box on the edge of the massive table. It looked out of place there, yet at the same time, right in place. He didn't smile, but the hard lines around his mouth softened slightly. He had saved someone, and now, through their own efforts, modestly but with great dignity, they thanked him. Not with money, not with services. With a simple piece of cake and words that meant more than any amount in a bank account. He looked out the window. The morning tradition now took on new meaning. It wasn't a one-sided gesture of generosity. It had become a quiet, modest dialogue, and that was important to him. A week passed. The morning boxes continued to arrive, but now Moran looked at them each time with a new feeling, a quiet, bright connection. She no longer saw them as mere alms. They were a bridge, and she threw her own little bridge in return. On Friday evening, Moran and Aaron were preparing dinner. Fresh vegetables for the filling lay on the table, and soup broth simmered on the stove. Aaron peeled a carrot, carefully creating a long orange spiral. The house smelled of food and comfort. Suddenly, a muffled engine sounded in the courtyard, unlike that of a delivery scooter. Moran perked up, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain. A low black car smoothly pulled into the courtyard, illuminated by a street lamp. Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized it. The door opened, and Jeon Jin-seok stepped out from behind the wheel. He was wearing dark trousers and a simple sweater, no jacket. He held two small but obviously heavy paper bags with handles. Moran rushed to the door, knocking her slippers off her feet. She nervously adjusted her hair, took a deep breath, and opened the door just as he approached the porch. They froze, looking at each other. His face was no longer filled with either the previous anger or the businesslike dryness. There was a slight, almost imperceptible embarrassment. "Good evening," he said first, nodding slightly. "I received the cake and a note." "Please come in," Moran breathed, stepping aside. Her voice was slightly hoarse with excitement. At that moment, Erin rushed into the hallway. Seeing the guest, her face lit up with a wide, toothless smile. "Uncle!" Jin-seok entered, took off his shoes, and placed his bags on the hallway floor. "Am I disturbing you?" "No, of course not. We're just making dinner," Moran said hastily. "I brought something." He pointed to the bags. "Seafood. And good tea." "I was thinking maybe—" He didn't finish, unsure how to formulate his spontaneous idea. "Wow, shrimp!" Erin exclaimed happily, peering into one of the bags. "Mom, are we going to cook shrimp?" Moran was taken aback. She hadn't expected this. Are you staying for dinner?" she asked hesitantly. "If you don't mind," Jin-seok replied, and for the first time, a simple, human uncertainty was evident in his voice. 10 minutes later, he stood in their small kitchen, rolling up the sleeves of his expensive sweater. Moran, overcoming her shyness, explained that she wanted to make some stuffed flatbread. Jin-seok nodded silently. He'd never cooked, but he could chop. Moran handed him a sharp knife and a cutting board, showing him how to finely chop an onion and pepper. He set to work with the concentration he usually displayed in negotiations. His movements were initially stiff, but precise. Erin, sensing the festivity of the moment, ran between them, carrying groceries. She brought Jin-seok a bowl of freshly peeled shrimp he'd brought. He listened attentively, nodded, and followed her instructions. The smells mingled: homemade broth, fried seafood, fresh vegetables. They cooked together, not as host and benefactor, not as strangers, like three people united by one simple task. There was only the warm light of the lamp above the table, the steam from the pots, and Jin-seok's quiet, businesslike voice asking, "Does this sauce go in here now?" When everything was ready, they sat down at the same wooden table. "Uncle, do you cook often?" Jin-seok cleared his throat. "No, never, to be honest. I have a cook. Did you like it today?" The girl continued her interrogation. He paused, looking at his imperfectly shaped flatbread. "Yes, unexpectedly. I liked it." Moran silently poured him tea from the pot he'd brought. The aroma filled the room. "Thank you for the cake," he spoke again, addressing Moran. "It was very tasty." "It's just homemade, nothing special," she said sheepishly. "That's what made it special," he quietly replied. The conversation flowed slowly, overcoming its initial stiffness. He asked Erin about school, about her drawings. He told her he had a dog as a child. Not about business, not about money, about simple things. Moran said little, but listened attentively, and a deep, calm happiness shone in her eyes. She saw this stern man gradually relax, his shoulders slump, and his gaze lose its usual caution. When dinner was over, Jin-seok looked at them both, at the well-fed, smiling girl, at the woman with a soft, enlightened face, at this small, poor house, but now filled with warmth and life. "I have to go," he said, standing up. But there was no longer the same determination in his voice. There was something like regret. "Come again!" Erin suddenly blurted out, jumping up from her seat. "We can cook again!" Jin-seok looked at Moran. She nodded, blushing but firmly. "We'd be happy to." "Really?" He nodded back, briefly, in his own way. "Okay, I'll call." He left. But this time, his departure did not leave behind an emptiness or a sense of awkwardness. It left a feeling of something new, just beginning, something fragile, but very real. Moran and Erin stood in the doorway, watching his car leave, then returned to the table piled high with dirty dishes. They cleaned together, in silence, but the silence was peaceful and full of understanding. Tomorrow, the morning box would arrive again, but now it was more than just a gift. It was a reminder of the bridge that had ceased to be a one-way street. It became a tradition, not just the morning boxes, which continued to arrive with impeccable punctuality. Another, more important one emerged. Every Saturday evening, a black car would appear at 1 Saran Street. Jin-seok would come for dinner. At first, he brought groceries, expensive cuts of fish, exotic fruits, exquisite sweets. But after his third visit, Moran gently but firmly stopped him at the door with his bags. "Today we're cooking what's already in the fridge," she said. "You bought too much. We can't eat it all." He froze, bag in hand, puzzled. "But I wanted to bring something." "You're already bringing something," Erin interrupted, clinging to his arm and helping him set the bag on the floor. Yourself. That's the main thing. Jinseok fell silent, looking at the girl. Then he nodded. Then I'll help. And so it went. He stopped bringing entire markets. Now he could bring just one, albeit interesting thing. A jar of rare honey, a bag of special rice, a beautiful box of tea. And the main meal was made from what was available. And they always cooked together. The kitchen in the small house became a magical place. Here, all roles were erased. Jinseok, who commanded thousands of people, obediently peeled potatoes here under the strict supervision of Aaron, who taught him how to cut out eyes. He learned to beat eggs for an omelet and distinguish cilantro from parsley. Moran, initially timid, could now gently correct him. Jonsi, the heat is too high. She was saving money. Her emaciated face filled out. A healthy glow appeared, and a calm confidence filled her eyes. One evening, after dinner, Aaron, exhausted, fell asleep right on the couch, her head on his lap. Jinseok froze, afraid to move. Moran, clearing the table, saw this. Their eyes met. She adores you, Moran said quietly. And I? He was carrying no bags. I want to show you something, he said, addressing both of them. If you'd like. He brought them to his mansion, not through the front door, but through the garden, which was just beginning to green up. Aaron ran ahead, admiring the size of the garden. Moran walked beside him, silent. It's very quiet here, she finally said. Yes, sometimes too quiet, he replied. He led them inside, to the very living room with the fireplace where it all began. The room was huge, immaculately clean, and empty, beautiful, but lifeless, like a photograph from a magazine. Is this where you fell asleep before your meal? Aaron asked, looking around. Yes, right here. They walked into the kitchen. It was any cook's dream. Huge, shiny appliances, marble countertops, everything in perfect order. And it, too, looked uninhabited. No one cooks here? Moran asked, surprised. The chef cooks. I don't, Jinseok said. He paused. I like your kitchen better. It's alive. He led them further through the house. He showed them the library with its unread books, the movie theater with its dusty chairs, the gym with its perfect equipment. Everywhere was rich, stylish, and soulless. Why did you show us all this? Moran asked when they returned to the living room. Jinseok turned to her, his face serious. Because I want to invite you to move here. Silence hung in the air. Moran's eyes widened. Aaron stopped moving her head. What? Was all Moran could breathe. This house is too big for one person. It's empty. And you? He paused, choosing his words. You feel cramped in that house. Aaron is growing up. You need your own room. There are many here. You can live your own life. You'll have security, space, a garden. Moran slowly shook her head, as if dispelling a vision. Changxi, that's impossible. This is your property. We can't. We are your. She was at a loss for words. You are not my subordinates or my dependents, he said firmly. You are the only people with whom I truly feel at ease. These are the ones that make me feel not like Jang Jin-sok, but just like a person. This house is just a warehouse for my valuables. And your house, that little house, his voice wavered. It's become the first place in many years where I want to come. Aaron approached her mother and quietly asked, Mom, are we going to live in the castle? Moran looked at Jinseok. She saw neither pity nor generosity in his eyes. She saw the same quiet, dull homesickness that had once been in her own, and an endless, awkward hope. It's too much, she whispered. People will think. I don't care what people think, he interrupted. I'm asking what you think. They left that day without an answer. Moran spent a week struggling with herself. Her pride said no. Her mind screamed for comfort, for Aaron's future. Her heart remembered his face as he sat on their sofa, and how Aaron fell asleep in his lap. She remembered the empty, cold halls of the mansion. A week later, on Saturday, Jinseok arrived as usual. He didn't ask any questions, simply helped prepare dinner. But there was a tense caution in his movements. Before sitting down at the table, Moran took a deep breath. We agree, she said, but with conditions. He froze, clutching a kitchen towel in his hand. First, we pay rent. Symbolic, but we pay. From my salary. He opened his mouth to object, but met her firm gaze and nodded. Second, we are not servants. We will not live in the backyard. We will be housemates, with our own rights and our own territory. Agreed, he replied immediately. Third, we continue our Saturday dinners, and we cook them together, all three of us. Always. For the first time that week, an expression appeared on his face. It was relief, mixed with something very warm. "This is the simplest condition of all," he said. The move didn't take long. They had very little belongings. Jinseok gave them an entire wing on the second floor, 2 bright bedrooms, a living room, and a bathroom. Aaron jumped with delight, running down the long hallways. Miran at first walked around like she was in a museum, afraid of breaking anything. It was strange at first. They lived in the same building, but tried not to disturb each other on weekdays. Jinseok left early in the morning. Miran worked from home and took Aaron to school. But in the evenings, their paths often crossed in the kitchen. Not the gigantic, sterile one, but the small, cozy one Jinseok had ordered installed in the former pantry next to their wing. It resembled their old kitchen. Here they prepared tea in the evenings, and sometimes a light dinner if Jinseok's work didn't finish too late. But Saturday remained sacred. They now cooked not in the cramped quarters, but in the vast main kitchen, which had finally come to life. Music, the smells of cooking, Aaron's laughter, the busy discussions of recipes between Miran and Jinseok, all this filled the cold halls with warmth and noise. One day, a few months after moving in, Jinseok returned home very late, tired after difficult negotiations. The light was on in the hallway. Aaron was asleep on the stairs, curled up in her bunny pajamas. A note lay on the step nearby. "We left you some soup. It's in the small kitchen. Heat it up in 2 minutes. Mom and Aaron." He carried the girl to her room and tucked her in. Then he went to their kitchen. A pot sat on the stove, a precisely measured portion of noodles, and some greens lay nearby. He heated up the soup as instructed, sat down at the table, and began to eat. It was simple chicken soup, the best he'd ever had. Time passed. Formalities faded. Aaron began running into his office to show him an A in her gradebook or simply sit behind him while he worked. Miran would sometimes drop by with a cup of tea if the light under his door was on too late. She learned not to knock. He learned to put his papers down when she entered. Autumn had arrived, the first anniversary of their strange acquaintance. They were sitting at the large dining table in the dining room, which had finally begun to be used for its intended purpose. Dinner was celebratory. Aaron, now 9 years old, chattered incessantly. Then she suddenly fell silent, rummaging in the pocket of her dress. "I have a gift for both of you," she announced solemnly. She placed 2 envelopes made of colored paper on the table, one for Miran, the other for Jinseok. Inside the envelopes were drawings. The drawing for their mother showed their old kitchen on Saran Street, with the 3 of them at the table, and the drawing for Jinseok showed this very mansion, but drawn in bright colors, with the sun shining over the roof. And also, the 3 of them were holding hands. And at the bottom, in block letters, was written, "My family." Jinseok stared at the drawing for a long time. Then he looked up and saw Miran looking at him. There were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. He cleared his throat. "Aaron," he began and stopped. His voice was unusually quiet. "Thank you. This is the most precious gift I have." The girl beamed. "Really? Really?" Then he looked at Miran. "Thank you. For everything." "No." She shook her head, wiping away a tear with her palm. "Thank you to us. You gave us everything." "You gave me more," he said simply. Later, when Aaron was already asleep, they drank tea in the living room by the fireplace. The same one. Now they lit a fire there often. "You know," Miran said, looking at the flames, "I sometimes think about that courier, El and Minho. If it weren't for his mistake, none of this would have happened," Jinseok finished. "I found him. He's now a shift supervisor at my logistics company. He's doing well." She looked at him in surprise. He shrugged. "He was the key. I thought he deserved a chance." They sat in silence. The room, once an icy vault of his loneliness, was now filled with a quiet warmth, not from the fire, from the presence of another person who had become family. "I never thought I'd have this," he suddenly said out loud, without looking at her. "What exactly?" "This. A silence that doesn't oppress. A home you want to return to. People who are waiting." Miran smiled. "It's simply called life, Jeonjin Soksi. Ordinary, real life." "Yes," he nodded. "It turns out that this is both the hardest and most valuable thing one can achieve." In the morning, as always, the box arrived. But now it was placed on the large kitchen table, where the kettle was already boiling, and the smell of toast filled the air. Aaron, already dressed in her school uniform, opened it. Inside were 3 éclairs. Not 2, 3. "Look!" she exclaimed. "Now there's enough for everyone." Jinseok, tying his tie, approached the table. Miran was pouring freshly brewed coffee into cups. She met his gaze and handed him a cup. Their fingers brushed lightly. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he replied. He sat down at the table and broke off a piece of eclair. Erin was telling a funny story about the teacher. Moran was adjusting her bow. A ray of sunlight filtered through the tall window and fell on the table, shared by three. A story that began with an empty stomach, a cold fireplace, and a rainy mistake ended here. At this table, in warmth, in silence filled with meaning, and in the simple, unclouded happiness of a well-fed morning that will never again be lonely.